Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're gonna be heading up to Red Lake and we're gonna be on the ice with Brad Hawthorne. He's gonna share a bunch of tips that'll help you catch more fish, especially if you're going up to Red Lake, but even if you're just fishing out on early ice for walleyes this season, I think you're gonna get a few good tidbits. So without further ado, let's jump right into the walleye catching action.
That was textbook. That right there is your upper Red Lake set line fish on a Vulcan. And let's see what that one was. I believe that was a glow red hook. So that one's gonna be under 17, and we've actually been bonking them pretty good. Like every 5-10 minutes, we're getting them to go. Matt just got one, Nick just got here, and Brian just got one. So hopefully, as we get towards the latter part of the day, we really start putting these numbers up. I think we're already into double digits. So if you guys are thinking of coming to Upper Red Lake, it's going on.
All right, now let's get some advice from Brad on early ice walleye locations. And this is not only gonna be applicable to Red Lake, where we were fishing that day, but anywhere that you're gonna be going out chasing early ice walleyes.
So location for walleye is, it's kind of different on every lake. You know, it pays to bounce back to the bait fish and know when your bait fish spawn. If you got a heavy tulipy population, they spawn in the fall, and those fish are gonna come in shallow, and they're gonna do their deal in shallow, and they're gonna take most of the predatory fish with them when they go to spawn, because obviously they're a schooling fish, and when they go in, they're food. So like Lake Lakes Mille Lacs, where those fish come in and they tend to hold there because there's residual fish spawning, and they hold there for 2-3 weeks. Now, Upper Red Lake, you take a lake like this, and again, it's shallow because a lot of the food for the minnows is in shallow, so we end up looking shallow. So this time of year, it almost always reigns true that some of the first places we look, not only because the fish are there, but because we can get there just via access. You can't always access the middle of the lake on first ice, nor do you want to, because it's not safe. So it's a good thing for ice fishermen that walleyes and perch and crappies and a lot of these fish tend to relate shallow in early ice, which is good for us not only in safety, but they tend to be in higher numbers too. So take a look at your bait fish in your lake, and it'll usually tell you if you have a good shallow early ice lake or not. And if not, sometimes you just got to get out to that first break weed edge, which in a lot of times in 12 to 18 feet of water, so you don't have to get out too far regardless. So take a look at your bait, take a look at what kind, take a look at when they spawn, and it'll let you know where you need to start.
Next up, Brad is gonna share his top 3 early ice walleye lures that he always has tied on this time of year when he's going out to chase those hungry walleyes.
So my top baits for early ice walleyes was the forage minnow and the buckshot up until last year when the glass buckshot came out. That lure quickly rose to the #1 category in my early ice walleye spoon at not only early ice, but for the whole year. My second place is a standard traditional buckshot rattle spoon. It's caught more walleyes in the state of Minnesota than any other lure out there in the ice, just because it's there. It's a nice hunk of lead that's loud, and it's got great colors, good glow, and it's got a terrific action underneath the water too. So those two are my #1 and #2. Now for my #3 is the forage minnow jig, and the reason is that is a great kind of neutral presentation jig where you can let it sit on the bottom. If your jigging cadence is up and the fish aren't committing to it while you're jigging up, you can lay it on the bottom. A lot of times I'll just drill it. So those are my #1, 2, and 3 would be glass buckshot, regular buckshot, and then the forage minnow jig would be all tied on early ice walleyes.
All right, now that we got a few tips from Brad, let's get into a little bit more walleye catching action.
Not a slob or anything. Oh yeah, it's an eater. It's got that red hook again. It's pink hooks, plain red glow, fed head minnow.
Just like that?
Just like that.
This is where the fish nap.
Take a sleepy.
This is where they, when they get tired, and this is where they rest.
That's a nice food safe cover right there.
Yeah. There you go, Brian. Nighty night.
You know, that's actually fairly dialed, Brad.
What?
That spin?
Well, just the whole setup, as opposed to putting them in a plastic bag and driving them home or whatever a lot of people do.
Oh, that's janky.
Yeah, I know.
Putting stuff in a trash bag and driving home with it, or like a bait bag. I mean, it works, right? But this bucket system here, I do take the, here.
Dude, that cover, you gave me one of those?
Yeah, I take
nice.
the rubber seal off there so it doesn't freeze. But that's nice. A little water in there and it keeps the fish from freezing, so when you get home you're not cleaning blocks of ice.
Now Brad runs his set lines a little bit differently than just about anyone I've fished with. So next up, Brad's gonna talk a little bit about how he likes to get set up and some of his thoughts and theories behind his whole set line strategy.
So set lines, like, they rule the game. You know, that when guys talk about, oh, we went out there and we caught 20 fish, a lot of times that'll be split between jig and spoons and set lines, and everyone's got their personal favorites. You know, I like tip downs, some guys like tip ups. There's a bunch of different ways to employ your dead stick rods. If you see what this rod's doing right now, there's a little bit of wind blowing and it's kind of shaking a little bit, it's kind of moving a little bit, like you see that tip just moving? That is perfect for me. I catch a lot of fish, just that slight subtle action. And the other part with the bait feeder reel, how this works is the fish starts to take it, and it tips down and it tips down and it tips down, and once you get to about there, the bait feeder reel starts spitting that line out, and then you run over to it, you either start cranking it or hit the switch, and you set the hook. Now some days, believe it or not, we catch 80 to 90% of our fish on this setup, and we're jigging 15-20 feet away with our rattle spoons, and we're calling those fish in, but they're too neutral to hit those jigging spoons, and they come over here and they pop these set lines. So a lot of times you'll see we're jigging, people talk about using jigging spoons, and they're hitting the set lines. That's what they're talking about. And then what guys don't talk about is when they quit jigging, the set lines also quit getting bit. So next time you're running your set lines, be sure to keep that jigging action up. Try to get that correlation between jigging and having them hit their set lines, and try to figure out which one they prefer or if they're working together next time out.
Now, one of the biggest factors with early ice walleyes is just the fact that generally you're gonna be walking out to these locations, so you're typically packing light and you typically have just a little pull behind sled behind you, because the bigger the sled, the harder it is to pull. So next up, Brad's gonna talk a little bit about his pull-out sled strategy, and he's not gonna give you a full walkthrough of everything he packs and all that, but just really quickly, he's gonna share one quick mod that he does to all of his sleds that he likes to pull behind early ice in the season.
This is my early ice sled here. This is the Otter Sports sled. And what I do here that's unique, I actually had a buddy of mine that was like, hey, you should do a video on that, because I don't think people know you can do that with these sleds. And I quite simply drill holes every couple of feet around my sled. And you see I have a bunch of bungees on here, and I have an X going across here. And what I do is I can put a bucket in here, and it holds it from jostling around. It holds it from rubbing on the bags, my auger, and things like that. And also, when I get my hub house on top, I can just strap everything down. So if you go over an ice heave and it doesn't allow stuff to roll out. But the one thing people don't realize is these roto-molded sleds, the edge of it, you can drill into them and use them as attachment points for your bungee cords. So just because it doesn't have any holes in it doesn't mean you can't drill a few holes in it to help secure your items down. So I guess if you have a sports sled like this, or even an Otter Pro Series sled, go ahead and pop a few holes on the edge and use them for bungee cords. And then, especially if you're towing stuff with a wheeler or a snowmobile, it keeps stuff from rattling around, whether it be a propane tank or heater or any of that stuff. So hopefully that tip, guys, will put a lot less wear on your gear, and maybe one of those cold 30 below days, it'll give you something to do in the garage. So anyways, put a few holes in your sled, put some bungees in them, and keep your gear good to go.
All right, well, that's about all we got for you in this one. Special thanks to Brad for sharing a bunch of good tips. It's a really fun bite up on Red Lake, and it's always a bite that I'm always trying to get on early in the season. So if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below, because we have a lot more awesome content coming in the future. And until then, we will see you in the next one.